Welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses, the podcast where we go beyond the bios, beyond the titles, and we explore the lessons that have shaped today's most inspiring leaders, all through the songs that have moved them. Each week, we build a playlist of a leader's life. 5 songs, 5 lessons, 1 unforgettable leadership playlist.
No boxes, just verses. We're not playing around. No boxes, just verses. Listen to the sound. No boxes, just verses. Our stories out loud. No boxes, just verses. Watch wisdom astound. The stories of how we found our way. Stories of how we learned to pray. Our stories out loud. Our wisdom, our pearls. Everyone say wow, 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 wow. Woo, no boxes, just verses. Feel it move.
And today, I am so honored and just pleased to welcome our guest, Craig Kielburger. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I'm not surprised in the slightest that you would come up with something so creative, so out of the box, having playlists define someone's life. I loved it.
It's kind of one of those things where I've been working on it and thinking about it for a long time. And I was finally just in the space where I could create something. And then people really liked it. Like it all lined up. But you know a lot about people building and movements and building things yourself. And we'll get into your origin story. So it is such a privilege and honor to have you here. And I want to make sure that before we dive into your story, that I actually share your bio with our audience. Craig Kielburger has spent more than 3 decades in the nonprofit sector, empowering people and organizations to create meaningful impact. He co-leads Legacy Plus, a collective of strategists, creators, and innovators who build authentic movements and legacy projects with measurable results for companies, foundations, and public figures. And we'll get into the truly iconic people and companies that you work with. You know, Craig, you are a New York Times bestselling author of not 1, not 2, not 5, but 10 books. I cannot wait to dig into that. Craig holds a degree in peace and conflict studies, an MBA, and a master's in human development. His work in education and human rights has been recognized globally, including, again, not 1, not 2, not even 10, 15 honorary doctorates and degrees. Wow. I gotta ask you about how these people are getting all these honorary degrees, but I digress. At the heart of Craig's work is a belief that purpose, empathy, and action, when aligned, can create lasting impact across communities, generations, and borders. Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Shin, thank you. That was beyond kind and beyond gracious. And I could reciprocate by sharing how incredible your background is. And for the listeners, how we had a chance to meet, I don't know if you plan to mention this, but it was literally on a service trip where Shannon was doing volunteer work in East Africa with Martin Luther King III and Andrea Waters King and Yolanda Renee King from the iconic, of course, family of the civil rights icons. And on that journey became a friend and an advisor and a champion for the Kings. And so when she said, this incredible podcast is taking place, I said, oh my gosh, absolutely honored and excited to join you.
It was such a honor, a blessing, and I don't even know, like one of those things where it was the right type of trip and mission-oriented thing to do. And I did it with my family. Like my boys came with me, my husband came with me, and we really got, like you got to know not Shannon as like the public figure or the corporate board member, but like as the person and as the mom and as the human. And what you guys have built in Kenya, and we'll get into this, not just in Kenya, but in other countries and with other iconic figures. I really wanted to share that with my network because I'd love for more people in my network to experience what I was able to experience with my family.
I love it. You mean that everyone gets a chance to see you like mixing cement and teaching in schools and with galoshes and getting right in the middle of the mass MR in rural areas. I love it.
Yeah. Everybody, let's do it. You guys heard it here. No Boxes, Just Verses trip in the next 12 months. Who wants to go to Kenya? Reach out to me. Seriously,
I love
reach out to me.
Live recording. Some people do a recording in the studio. You could do a recording in the field.
That would be, like a safari and a recording. That would be
Mm.
okay, you heard it here, listeners. If you're interested, seriously reach out to me because I think we can make it happen. But this podcast is about you, Craig, not me. And I want to know, who is a young Craig? Where does he grow up? What is he dreaming of? The song that you pick is Take Me Home Country Roads by John Denver. So tell us about like where you grew up and just how you
Yeah,
started.
absolutely. So it was a pretty unusual childhood from a very early age. So I grew up a little north of Toronto in Canada, parent school teacher. It should have been a very ordinary childhood. Like older brother, dog, not quite a white picket fence, but pretty darn close. But when I was 12 years old, I read this story about a child slave in Pakistan. And it was on the front page of our local paper. I was looking for the comics at the time, and I saw this story and tore it from the newspaper and started pen paling back and forth with this, at the time, little known activist in India saying, I want to know what's going on. I read the story. I want to help. And started doing small fundraisers. And he said, if you want to help, I'll host you. And 6, 7, 8 months later, saved up enough money, pleaded and convinced my mom to let me go with a friend and set off on this kind of life-changing journey through Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Thailand, Nepal, India. I was 12, hosted by a man named Kailash Satyarthi, who, 15, 18 years later would win the Nobel Peace Prize as we were kicking down doors, freeing children. Like, it was this unbelievable beginning of this charitable story. And so that was the origin of how this all started, by accident.
Wait, I don't understand, but back up because I want to hear
Sure.
more, but I just want to understand.
Yeah.
You at that age had the foresight to like want to go on this trip, and then you meet somebody who's gonna, who's obviously at like really starting to do a lot of things that make him iconic, and he wins a Nobel Peace Prize. Like, who are you? Who is this like man kid?
Oh, well, it's just a really ordinary kid who was pretty shocked by what was going on in the world. And that was like
Wow.
like, again, we started with garage sales, pen pal, and then it becomes even more surreal when I'm on this trip to Asia, because while I'm traveling I had my 13th birthday on this trip, I found that the prime minister of the country where I was born in Canada was traveling and signing trade deals, having this trip in Asia, but not talking about child labor. And I had seen this reality of kids. And so I show up at his hotel. I had to get a meeting with him. It was printed in the local paper. And of course, the front desk says buzz off. But I write him this letter and I start sliding it under the doors of the hotel rooms, trying to get this message to him because, my mind, it made sense. Security told me I can't do that. And they said, but if you really want to get your message to the Prime Minister of Canada on this trade delegation, you should hold a press conference. So with 2 free child slaves from Asia, who I had met on this trip, we sat in the lobby of this hotel. They told their stories, and we ended up interrupting this trade delegation. And the Prime Minister of Canada, sat down and we met and we spoke about this, and he promised to raise this issue, and then went on the front page of newspapers. And this is what launched this, at the time, tiny charity. But suddenly we found, BBC and CNN carrying the story, and I kept traveling actually through Asia for another 2 weeks, and eventually got back home. And this, we called Free the Children, was the name of the first charity that we ended up setting up. That's why I'm kind of getting eventually to John Denver and all of this, but it was this very surreal, unusual childhood, because this charity ended up on Oprah's couch, and she's pledging to build 100 schools with us shortly thereafter, and spending time with the vice president, Al Gore and Tipper, is playing drums, and where they're having a conversation about raising kids who care. Or I still remember, and when you asked me the first song as a childhood, kind of this one popped in my mind, this kind of surreal night that went, this guy sat with us and played music for 5, 6, 7 hours. And I remember calling my mom afterwards and saying, the nicest guy, and he wants to support the charity, and he wants to do a concert, and I don't know if anyone's going to show up though, because his music's a little slow. And she was like, do you remember any of his songs? I was like, yeah, he had this really catchy one, like Take Me Home, Country Road. And my mom was like, you spent the night like just jamming with John Denver? She's like, you have no idea who that is. I was like, yeah, I have no idea who that is. She's like, trust me, people will show up. Say yes to the benefit concert. Say yes. But it was this kind of very surreal childhood where this charity, within the first couple years of operations, had taken off, and we already had staff, and it would grow to, well in excess of 1,000 staff, and programs in 45 countries, and operations around the world with clean water and health and programs serving kids.
And just to orient like the listeners for where we are at this point, you're not 18.
Oh, no, I went to an alternative
Right.
high school. My parents moved out of our house. They moved to my grandfather's house. Our whole house got taken over by the charity at this point. Oprah did 5 more shows with us, which just the charity that exploded at that point. You can imagine this was our childhood journey, building and
But
scaling this nonprofit.
you're meeting
Yeah.
Oprah. You met Oprah when you were like a teenager.
Yeah. First time I met her, I think it was 14 or 15. I was on her show, and because it was Oprah, people got surprises. And originally the surprise was supposed to be this young person from Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, was fundraising to help support our projects. And then she surprised everyone, and she ended up making a pledge that it was actually, oh my gosh, in total, she ended up giving, north of $10 million to support our organization. And it was the largest gift she'd ever given at the time, and the first time she'd ever done a very large gift internationally. And we had no business receiving a gift in this attention. So as you might recall, for those who watched Oprah, her show was live to tape. It wasn't live. And so the next day, her chief operating officer sat us down and said, like, there's no way Oprah's giving you this money. Like, we thought you were fundraising for UNICEF or something. We didn't think it was you guys were running as children your own charity. And I remember, you'll appreciate this given obviously your CFO background. He sat me down and he said, we'll give you the money if you can answer 3 questions. Number 1, how did you hedge currency risk? Number 2 was, do you have paraseismic engineering models for the school you were building? And number 3 was, what were the governance and fiduciary oversight mechanisms you had in place? And I remember as a kid, like, I didn't understand the meaning of the words, never mind how to answer them. And I actually said to him, well, if you define them, like, maybe we have them. And he was looking at me going, listen, if you don't know what they are, trust me, you don't have them. But he was incredible. And they ended up finding the best lawyers and accountants and putting all these operating systems in place to help the charity scale, which, as you know, is the hardest thing of really building the infrastructure of any nonprofit. And partially it was risk mitigation because her brand had supported a very large charity, and partially because, candidly, she was just an incredible mentor. She would share her own board and we'd present to her board. And it became this extraordinary learning experience. And that partially is what also continued to catapult the charity's growth.
Your story reminds me of like the modern day thing that we see sometimes where a kid will go on Name the Show, like a Star Search or whatever, right? And their life went from normal to like catapulted to, like you said, the house became like the office. And it seems like it happens like in a matter of one day, you're like normal Craig going to school with your friends in the schoolyard. And the next day you're like, you might need security because like the places that you're going, that like you're meeting prime ministers and things of that nature. And it happens that quick. So it went from a kind of normal childhood to like a completely different world, seems like.
It was a learning experience. It was a lot of fun. And I think I had the luckiest childhood in the world. Like, incredible mentors, incredible opportunities to learn from. I spent days traveling with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or, Archbishop Desmond Tutu became one of our advisors and mentors, and would come to board meetings and sit and coach us. And it was just extraordinary. Like, you just realize what good people there are in the world. And then on the flip side, we saw a lot of very difficult situations. We worked in conflict zones. We, Sierra Leone, helping to rebuild with points of conflict, or natural disasters and stepping in, and obviously issues on human trafficking. We shifted our model. Initially, we were literally freeing children from human trafficking situations, and we evolved it to prevention. The reality is, if you free a child from human trafficking, it's not like in the movies, like Taken, they don't get kidnapped. Most cases, they end up here because of poverty. So you got to solve the underlying issues. And so you look at schools and clean water and health and small businesses and women's empowerment. And so we targeted regions with the highest incidences of human trafficking and put these programs into place. And that grew to, thousands of schoolhouses and clean water programs and medical initiatives. And eventually in villages, we would evolve our whole model to, we'd start primary schools and secondary, and we'd even build colleges to train the nurses who would then work in the hospitals we built, because as the infrastructure requirements grew to make sure the local community was able to sustain them. So it grew to quite a scale, larger than we ever imagined, in meeting the needs of the community.
Craig, where do you think, and because this is going to play out throughout the rest of your story, and certainly towards the, what you're doing today and what I'm certainly more familiar with, I think, where do you think you got that just spirit to be deeply mission focused? Like at the center of what you do, because clearly this is something like you're a young kid. Where do you think that came from?
So I appreciate the question because there is a kindness in asking the questions, like the mission focused. I'll answer it on two levels. One level, my mom, she had this incredible journey that I think modeled a lot for me in the sense of, she was homeless for part of her childhood. It was a really rough journey. And she was very intentional. Like she never walked past a homeless person without stopping and talking and modeling behavior around a fierce sense of social justice. But the second kind of layer to answer your question, I say this now that I'm a parent myself, I've got 3 boys, is there's part of me that's a little frustrated with the fact that people look at, and listen, it was unusual, Oprah and traveling to Asia, like don't get me wrong, but I feel like that's not the unusual, like to care that passionately about freeing kids from child labor and solving these critical issues in our world. It is a little bit disheartening. Like that's the unusual thing, when in reality, that's how we should be raising all of our young people. Like this is shocking, the state of our world, when you look at the environment or human trafficking issues or poverty, and we've become so numb to it. Let me answer your question by this way. One of the great moments of my life, and there was no soundtrack to it, so I couldn't write it when you asked me the questions, was when the first time I met His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. There was a group of us locked in a room at the Raoul Wallenberg Symposium for about a week in Sweden. And the entire, it was an incredible group. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Brundtland, heads of state, brilliant people were all brought together. And they called me at the last minute because they wanted the diversity of the world and they had no young people. So they would I represent the youth of the world? So I sat and basically listened to these people and they debated what's the greatest challenge facing our world. And they discussed nuclear proliferation and peace in the Middle East and climate and all these issues, same issues, frankly. Turn back the time, this was 25 years ago, and they had the same issues today. And eventually, His Holiness the Dalai Lama kept challenging people and saying, but we can solve that. We produce enough food in the world. We know how to live side by side peacefully. It's not easy, but people can do it. And we put a man on the moon, for God's sakes. Going through all these issues. And eventually the group coalesced around the idea that the most challenging thing, the single greatest need of our world, is that we're raising generation after generation of passive bystanders. And I think that is it. We raise people. It's shocking the level of poverty in our cities and streets today. It is shocking that you look right now in South Sudan or the war, the conflict. It's shocking that human trafficking still exists. And it's equally shocking that we largely in society accept it. The simple truth is we do. Governments do and society does. And we almost kind of shrunk and say it's a necessary evil. But so I share this because I think as a young person, I just hadn't become, frankly, numbed enough to the reality. I saw an article about child slavery and I said, oh my God, how can this exist in the world? And so with the naivety of a 12-year-old, sure, but also with the basic sense of kind of human dignity and decency of a 12-year-old that today in our world today, we almost explain away. And so the second charity we started actually became entirely inspired by that conversation with His Holiness. We set something called we.org, and it was focused on making service the norm for young people in schools, to actually teach service and teach compassion and try to get young people involved. It didn't matter the cause, but get them involved, because unless we fix that, we go back to first principles, compassion, connection, we'll never solve these more tactical issues of our time of how to feed people or how to deal with climate change. We have to start by looking at the compassion and the sense of social justice in the hearts of individuals.
So, Craig, you had quite an upbringing. Many would say it was normal and then it wasn't normal. But
Sure.
it certainly explains a lot about, as we follow your path, on some of the things that you wind up doing even after that. So the next song that you pick, and I wasn't familiar with this song, and I'm so glad you picked it because I love hearing about new music and adding that to my playlist. So it's called Waving Flag, and it's by, I believe the name is Kenan. Is that right?
Yeah, Kenan. He's a Somali rap artist, in essence, and it became this anthem for those who remember the kind of FIFA in 2010. But why it was relevant to us is that was the year of the Haiti earthquake. And for those who remember, there's about 250,000 people who lost their lives. And it was a really just back to what we're talking about here about the need to lean in on the world. This is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It still is. And you look at hundreds of thousands of people died needlessly, candidly, in a lot of cases because of the poor construction and the reality. And so we started doing this. I remember this song, we were driving supplies and within days we were going through the Dominican Republic, driving across the border regions, bringing truckloads and convoys in because we had already had schools and projects in Haiti before this. and bringing all of these containers in and delivering them to our schools that had been turned into makeshift shelters and to our farms that we had there that were trying to feed kids with the hunger that was setting in, to our water projects that were trying to deal with the cholera epidemic that was setting in. And it was just in that moment we reached out and we were working with him, this extraordinary young artist. And I love this partially because, from Somalia, very humble background, creates this song that becomes wildly successful during this FIFA anthem, and then does a special version of it for Haiti that ended up raising millions and millions of dollars to help support this incredible outpouring of aid. It was like Live Aid, for those who remember this, that we were able to channel and to meet the urgent needs in the community. And there was just something so beautifully symbolic about this. At the time, he was in his 20s. To your point, like, candidly, he was known, but not that well known as an artist. And an ordinary individual who leaned in to create this massive impact in the world. Just a reminder of who actually changes the world. It's those who show up and who want it to change.
I love that. And so at this point, you guys are operating in how many countries, and like the nonprofit organization, are you co-running this with your brother at this time?
Yeah. So my older brother quickly got involved from almost the earliest days to when Oprah gave us that very large grant. One of the requirements, as she said, is the actual phrase her chief operating officer used is, "I want adult supervision." At the time, again, I would have been probably 14. So I called my older brother, who was 19. Like, he was ancient. He was at college, for God's sakes. And so he showed up, and legitimately, he was going to Harvard. So, like, this is, nothing to sneeze at. And he flew into the meeting. And I still remember the chief operating officer just rubbing his temples going, "I wanted adult supervision. I didn't want a 19-year-old. I wanted someone with silver hair," like literally doing this, like rubbing his temples. And I was like, he's 19. He's like ancient. I was trying to argue this to this guy. But yes.
That's hilarious. So, you've at this point, your brother's joined and you guys are operating. Give us just an idea of like the scale, because this is kind of like your young adulthood, but you're now operating in multiple countries. I mean, you're running a business.
Oh, yeah, no. So at the height, we were in 45 countries, programs ranging from, so Haiti dealing with, post-earthquake relief, to India, again, preventing human trafficking, Sri Lanka, with the conflict that took place there in various regions. It was a very long-standing conflict. Viewers and listeners might remember mountains of Ecuador, or, the Amazon basin, or Chiapas in Mexico, or helping with, again, just regions around the world, from Kenya to Tanzania, from South Africa to Ethiopia, from Sierra Leone to you name it. And so the organization was everything from food, medicine, schools, clean water, health. We ended up implementing a 5-pillar development model. So our work really focused on education, so primary, secondary, and tertiary. So we were actually all the way up to colleges. Clean water, so drilling boreholes and transportating. Medical, so mobile medical clinics, hospitals, and then training the next generation of nurses. Not doctors, frankly. The nurses were far more helpful. Food security, so we were both doing school lunches and also helping to build large-scale farms. And then lastly was job creation. And this was a huge turning point for us, was creating an economic flywheel to help support the projects, where a man named Jeff Skoll, who you probably know in the Bay Area as one of the founders of eBay, became this incredible philanthropist. And we reached out to him with this, at the time, still fledgling charity. And he said, "I will support you," but he challenged us and he said, "I want you to build a business plan to earn income for the charity." And I remember turning to him and saying, "Oh, Jeff, you don't understand. We're a charity." And he looked at me, he was like, "Yes, I get you're a charity. But charity is a tax status." He goes, "I want you to earn income to make this thing self-sustaining." And it ended up growing into, we built all of these kind of earned income revenue models that would sustain our operations around the world, including at the height, 3,000 women doing beautiful beadwork projects that we would sell through like Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom's and whatnot. And then we'd create revenue to fund back and sustain these development projects and trips, hence the Eco Lodge that you stayed with us in Kenya, or coffee. We still have a all women owned and operated line of coffee co-ops around the world for women. So all of these things became ways to economically empower. So the organization just kept growing and scaling with these various ways that are all dedicated to this fundamental idea of human dignity, human development, empowering communities to be self-sustaining.
I love that lesson that you just shared, and I think it bears repeating. because how fortunate, I always talk about, we all need mentors and supporters. Everybody, I don't care who you are. And I think how fortunate that you were able to get Jeff Skoll, who like once there's now the Skoll Foundation and all those things, to give you that lesson. So many people need that lesson even today who are running organizations, in that non-for-profits are not-for-profit under 501c3 of the tax code. There is a code. You go to section 501, paragraph C, subparagraph 3, and it has a description of how you can be quote unquote tax exempt. But what it does not say is, and you can't make money to sustain your operations. It does not say that. The two are different things. In fact, if you don't make money somehow to sustain your operations, that organization will not exist anymore because it won't have any money to operate. And so for you to early on get that lesson of, I need to understand your business plan. I don't care that you are a non-for-profit for tax reasons. If you don't have a plan, I'm not going to be a part of this. To get that lesson early on is, to me, really very prescient, because I know people who have run organizations for 30, 40, 50 years, and they're just getting that lesson now. And their organization could have done so many other things had they had that mindset of understanding that a nonprofit has to be for profit in its ways of making money, at least, like that are legally ways for it to make money.
Absolutely. They're just tools in a toolbox. Again, I know we don't want to jump too far ahead of the story, but now we have a chance to help others create impact. And people will immediately say, I want to create a charity. And I say, whoa, whoa, whoa. What's the outcome you want? And there's a million different ways to get there. And it might be a charity, but there's also 1.9 million charities between the US and Canada. So just before we jump to that, like fundraising's hard. So let's look at, what are you trying to solve as the issue, and then work back from there.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And well, look, let's keep the story going, because it's just more and more exciting, because I know where it goes to. So next up, you picked the song Kill Them With Kindness by Selena Gomez. And you really you're in a zone at this point. You're scaling. You've been doing this nonprofit work for, at this point, you're kind of turning into a veteran, even though you're probably in your early 30s, but you've been doing this for 15, 20 years because you started so early. So why that song, and kind of help us understand where you guys are in the building of your organization.
So first time I ever heard the song, and the funny part about this whole musical overview is I don't listen to a whole lot of music. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but not a whole lot of music. And so most of my music I got exposed to was often through the organization. Like, again, meeting Caden through this, or John Denver. And so Selena, we ended up doing a lot of work with Selena Gomez. And the first time I ever heard this song, Kill Them With Kindness, was we were in Kenya, and she came out to see our projects, and she was sitting with the students just singing. And they were singing back with her. And I was like, what a great song. In the middle of the Masai Mara, as she's just jamming there with the students in one of our secondary schools. And it's an all-girls boarding secondary school. And they were just having a blast. We were having these conversations together around her cause and her passion. And Selena had gotten involved through the organization at that point through the second charity we started, the We.org one, focused on getting youth involved in service. And the aha we realized was, society just really is so me-focused. It is the selfie culture. It is the consumeristic culture. It is the disconnection culture. And we wanted to somehow try to turn that around for young people. And we said, what shifts culture? It's partially music. It's partially community. It's partially connection. It's partially reward. So we built a program in schools called We Schools, where young people would do service. They'd learn about causes. They'd get involved. We started to infuse this right into curriculum. So it still exists for any family out there who's got their kids who are taking, for example, AP advanced placement courses. They can actually do AP with We Service. So they learn their biology by testing water in the community. They learn their Spanish by helping a new immigrant fill out government forms. They learn their comp sci by coding apps for nonprofits. And the teachers verify the service is done, and it gets noted on your transcript. So we built these type of programs. We built this with College Board. We built this in all 50 US states with different schools in K through 12. And then we wanted to reward youth who did an incredible year of service. So we put on these stadium events. We actually filled 140 stadiums. And Selena Gomez would come, or J-Lo, or Macklemore, or Justin Bieber, or you name it, Ariana Grande, Imagine Dragons, and they would do these incredible concerts. But they would also hear Malala Yousafzai get up there and share her story, or Sir Branson about what it meant to be, dyslexic and build Virgin, or Gorbachev and talk about how the world almost came to blowing itself up, or Jane Goodall and talk about our environments, and Muhammad Yunus and microcredit, and all of these incredible individuals. So you'd have these celebrities, you'd have these iconic change makers, and then young people would stand up on stage and they'd explain how they earned their way in and talk about the causes and how they. And so we packaged this together, and ABC broadcast this and CBS broadcast this. And back in the day when Facebook was, the primary social platform, it actually became the largest charity on the world on Facebook, with people following and engaging with millions of followers watching this content. And so for us, there was this desire to shift culture to say, it isn't just about me. You have to have a little bit more we thinking, we acting. And so we had about 1.5 million young people who earned their way through the live events to physically come to the stadiums. And then we had millions more who took the actions in their schools. But it was this incredible way to celebrate the power of youth as a force for good.
That's incredible. I'm sitting here laughing about like Selena's doing this song with the kids, and you're like, "Oh, did she Did she just make up this song I never heard before?" So I'm like, no, it's so.
Oh,
deep.
listen, it was crazy. Like, we have artists who'd pop up all the time and come, and they would just pop over to Kenya. We'd have Ellie Goulding pop in and she would teach music to the kids, or Nelly Furtado would pop in and spend time with all these great musical artists would come. Madonna's family, like you name it, would come to hang out and spend time at our project sites around the world. And music was this great connector. And so they would often be jamming. And this is how, half my playlists was spending time with these people and just saying, like, that's a pretty cool song. I remember the Jonas Brothers came, and if I can't remember which of the brothers, but if you actually look, they went through the traditional Maasai, like with actual hot coals to get they have a tattoo basically for hanging out with the team of the ground. It was just this very awesome, hands-on. People could get away from paparazzi. They could do real service. They all came to volunteer. They would spend time. Right. Demi Lovato came for her 21st birthday and said she didn't want to be around, the Vegas and the scene, and she just wanted to do service and roll up her sleeves and help in the communities. And so it was this really amazing way for people to make a meaningful impact.
I can definitely firsthand vouch for that. When you're there, you're in the village, guys. You're in the culture. You're not thinking about what's going on anywhere else in the world. I think that you mentioned Selena going to the all-girls boarding school. I believe that's the school I went to.
It was the same one. That's partially why I wrote it down candidly, because I thought of you. Yes.
Yeah, I did go to that. And it was just the level of commitment that those girls have to their education. I was looking at one of my kids who I was like, okay, so you're complaining about your private school that I pay for. Look at what these girls are doing every day, 24/7. To be here to change the trajectory of their lives. It was completely humbling. And again, it is an experience that I highly recommend that listeners look into doing something like that. So, all right, well, let's move on to the next part of your journey. Like most journeys, we all have forks in the roads and twists and turns. There's no successful leader that doesn't have those things happen. And for you pick, actually, Craig, no one has picked this song to date. And it is actually one of my favorite songs. It really is. And I've met this artist, and she's humble, she's beautiful. And the fact that this song came, she brings it to life in such a beautiful, the melody is just, it almost brings tears to my eyes. And that's Rise Up by Andra Day. 2020 was a year. So why that song and what was going on? Because 2020 was definitely a year for a lot of us.
Oh my gosh, yes. So she did kindly perform it at We Day, and our celebrations became a bit of an anthem. And our last celebration for We Day we held at Wembley in the UK in February or March 2020, which you look back is like wild considering. And at the time, I remember the National Health Services in the UK said, totally fine, fill the stadium as long as young people don't high five each other, because they thought that's how it was spread. And then, of course, what was it, 2 months later, the world started shutting down because global health pandemic declared. And as a charity, it was on 2 levels devastating for us. On one level, because live events, we're filling stadiums, quickly came to an end. Global trips and travel, how we have all these youth. We had 40,000 volunteers go volunteer in countries with us around the world. All came to an end. We had mall-based retails where we were selling thousands of items handmade by women artisans come to an end. When your name is we, you connect people together around the world. And then simultaneously, I think that even wasn't the hardest thing for us, although it was still devastating. We ended up taking on this whole thing in Canada because so I spent a lot of my time on both sides, US and Canada. We were obviously, frankly, bigger in the US than Canada because of sheer population, but Canada we were founded in. And so the Canadian government asked us if we would take on an emergency program getting young Canadians to do paid community work to help with like COVID contact tracing and helping out with virtual tutoring. And would we hire and train 100,000 young Canadians to do this? And naively in my mind, I thought, oh my gosh, COVID, this is going to bring the whole world together. We're going to unite. We're going to serve. We're going to help. That quickly it went sideways with debates around vaccines and politics and how quickly this went sideways. And so our initiative that we agreed to take on became a political football and quickly torn apart in the public domain. And the media quickly fractured, depending on your political beliefs, the media kind of fractured with politicians on this. And we quickly found ourselves engulfed in this political firestorm and with media creating false stories. And we had to start suing media around this and this, like, it just blew my mind of how in a world of COVID, where, I always used to think that, if aliens showed up, suddenly the whole world would unite together, kind of that extraordinary shock. And that naive part of me thought that this would be the moment for humankind to rally. And it turned out to be one of the most difficult, both because of literally the COVID, but also frankly because of the politics. And I say the capital P politics, but also the media just being so irresponsible and fracturing. And it was such a learning experience about how values of our world are sadly really disconnected. So that for us was this moment that was the darkest moment where the charity was brought to its knees, where our work was brought to its knees. And we had to choose whether we would just, go and get a traditional role and, teach or wrap up, or if we would rise up. And we would have to rebuild the charity, rebuild what we do, rebuild and step away from politics and soothe journalists and hold them accountable for false statements and say, you know what, I still have faith in humanity that things like COVID should actually bring us together as opposed to tear us apart.
Yeah, I can't even imagine because at the scale that you are operating, at the number of people that you are providing services and economic empowerment to, and for that to shut down in a way where you don't even know when or if it's going to open back up, that is not for the faint of heart. It takes a special type of person to lead through that. Yeah.
Oh, it was brutal. Yeah, no, it was absolutely brutal. And, having to let hundreds of staff and programs go. And it was certainly the hardest time of our lives, my life, my wife's, my brother's, our senior team. And I look back on that moment and I think the single hardest point, candidly, wasn't the operation side. We're fairly experienced at that. Again, sometimes you got to tighten, so you got to. But the single hardest part was the faith in humanity question. Does it fundamentally shatter your faith in humanity enough? Like at this time, and this is why even as I think back 5 years later, as I now remember this moment, for me, it wasn't COVID. Like COVID was an extraordinary medical thing. Like, yes, of course we had to close our stadium events and we had to pull our volunteers from around the world. And of course we had to let hundreds of staff go if we couldn't afford them. But the part that shocked me out of all of this was, in hindsight, how partisan the response quickly became and how the vitriol became. And, and there was a moment I was like, do I ever trust politicians again? Do you ever trust media again? Do you ever trust society again to kind of do the proverbial right thing when time has emerged, when we became this collateral damage of politics? And I look back in hindsight, and I think the biggest rise up choice was choosing to have faith in humanity again, choosing to say, because in my mind, like a children's charity, if that becomes like a children's charity, for God's sake, is sacred. Like if that's not sacred, I don't know what is sacred in our world when that gets attacked in the middle of all of this. But it was that moment of realizing that as we continue to do the work that we love and that's necessary, choosing to have faith in humanity, to have faith in, we'll keep doing the same work we did before and keep doing the same work afterwards. Doesn't matter. Sometimes people are supportive and sometimes they're not, but you just keep doing the work that you know needs to be done.
I love that lesson. So you do rise up. I'm glad you chose to believe in humanity. I'm glad you chose to keep fighting the good fight. I'm glad you did not give up. And today, things are a lot different. I certainly meet you in this period post-COVID. And the song that you picked is by Dirt, and it's by Jordan Davis featuring Luke Bryan. Tell me kind of what's going on today, why that song, what you're prioritizing today, and where you are with things today.
So Buy Dirt is a little bit of an odd choice, I realize. But if you actually listen, it's some beautiful words and messages. And today I live with my wife on the family farm. We've got 3 boys who we have the most amazing, fun, wonderful, my God, they're human tornadoes. It's just a pause from like they're 8, 5, and 2. So like, woo, we're right in the middle of it.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
so much of our work today is, there's kind of the personal, there's the professional. Let me start with the personal. Like, what's really important? If anything, 2020 has taught me, it is at the end of the day how we are disconnected often, and we have to reconnect. We reconnect with our values, what we know and we love. We reconnect with our family, faith, community. I came to this realization that we can have all of the tactical projects, schools and water, health, etc. But if we can't create the fundamental shift necessary on words like connection and love, we can't actually solve the fundamental issues in our world. And to the listeners and viewers who might not fully understand what I'm saying here, I was an activist from the youngest of ages. So when people like the Dalai Lama would talk about it, I remember this moment where I was with him in Northern Ireland, and he got this question. And he talked about the importance of creating a culture of love. And then someone else asked him another question. He talked about how we have to teach people how to love each other. Another question came in, and he said, we've got to teach kids to love each other in this world. And listen, I was one of those kind of hot-headed kids who wanted to be an activist. And so I said to His Holiness, I said, why is it no matter the question you always get asked, you always give the answer of love? And he looked at me and he said, because the answer is always love. And it wasn't until after 2020 I fully appreciated that. Why did the world go so crazy with like vaccine mandates and fighting and grabbing toilet paper and elbowing and politicians ripping society apart and all that unfolded? And it's gotten, some ways even worse with society today. Is this fundamental idea of compassion, connection, of love, these fundamental value-based aspects that we need to reconnect on that. And so on a personal note, how do I live that? Well, reconnect with the ground. We could bring kids, raise children who deeply connect the world, make sure we have service on a regular basis, family of faith, family of connection. And we, on the professional level, turned to our group and said, we want to create what grew to our third charity, where we help people build their own charities and movements, where we get to use the skills we've learned to help them create a world with more love and more connection and more kindness and more service, and to tackle some of the most systemic issues of our world. So, not only head in the clouds, but to have it towards this higher mission of love and connection. And how do we create real meaningful impact in this world?
Okay, I was just making the heart sign. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, I'm just like, yes, choose love. That's exactly what we need today.
And I know it sounds like, again, my 18-year-old self would have rolled eyes hearing me say this, but you actually spend time and realize, like, fundamentally, you've got to go back to first principles. Again, how we got to spend our time together is one of the partners we help to operationalize is realize the dream, this incredible vision of the King family. So our staff has the honor to help back end and fulfill this. And they're building the beloved community, as Dr. King talked about, which is literally be love. And we've got 500 nonprofits, and we are doing 100 million hours of service. And we have, blue states and red states volunteering side by side. And we have the NFL and the MLB and NBA having players show up and using sports to unify. And fundamentally, yes, we're doing 100 million hours of service, but the reason we're doing 100 million hours of service is to get people to come side by side who don't normally volunteer side by side, to literally be loved, to support their community. We're doing this for others out there. Like this whole idea of building the back end for these incredible visionaries to scale their movements has become this privilege to help others now build their vision by what we have learned over our 30-year journey.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it with so many iconic leaders, and you're also doing it with people who are business leaders. Some of them are not, like, they're not all famous entertainers or actors, civil rights leaders, that you are helping lots of movements. And so we will put the links and stuff in our show notes for how people can follow and understand all of the movements that you're working on. Then also, I would love for you to share. I got the opportunity to visit you guys at your camps and your locations in Kenya. It'd be great if you could describe a little bit more about what's in Kenya, but that's not the only place that you guys operate these type of camps as well. So if you could share that with the listeners, I think that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, no, one of the things we wanted to give people the opportunities to embody service for people who want to create a meaningful impact and go teach and connect and learn and immerse themselves. And so in Kenya, to your point, on the edge of the Masai Mara is this beautiful region where on kind of you go a little bit to one side, a little bit to the west, you see the wildebeest and zebra and gazelle. And a little bit to the right, we have a hospital and a college, secondary schools, primary projects that families can come and connect and volunteer and serve and learn with. Or in Rajasthan in India, where people have a chance to connect and learn, again, in yoga and meditation and mindfulness from the local community, while also engaging in development and helping to provide skills-based service and connect. Or the Amazon basin with a Minga Lodge we have in Ecuador, where you spend time with the indigenous populations on a reserve that is a sanctuary for animals, but also spend time learning and connecting from indigenous cultures about the environment and ecology and how to live a life that is in more balance with nature. And so we wanted to create these living classrooms to give people these incredible experiences for families and various groups to come together to, again, see how we can create this tangible impact in this world. And we're excited. They have quickly taken off, and we're thrilled that you joined us. And, we're excited to be hosting the next podcast that you have there in a fun and engaging way.
Oh, I'm claiming it. That's absolutely happening.
I love it.
I just have to decide which one of those places am I going to do it from. But definitely, listeners, we will be taking a trip with Legacy Plus. That is in the cards. Listen, Craig, your life, your journey, your lessons are nothing short of inspirational. I would love to share with the listeners how we can support what you're working on, how we can follow it. If you could just give us a little snippet on how we can better support you and Legacy Plus. And then I also want to know, what's the one song that makes you just happy? If I played it right now, you would just have a big smile on your face.
I love it. Well, we support so many other organizations and movements. We've got hundreds of team members who help implement and build movements for others. So if they end up on Legacy Plus, PLUS, legacyplus.org, they can see, today's National Say It Now Day. We have an amazing gentleman where it's about kindness in this world. Or they can see a project we're building on Tech for Good with studios that are giving Hollywood content to make learning fun and engaging. Or they can learn about an incredible woman in Chicago who's tackling mental health by bringing women together in community. And all of these great initiatives, these are all built service opportunities. So we'd love to welcome any individuals get involved. And to answer your question, with 3 boys, the song that is on constant play right now in our household is, I don't know if you noticed this, but Zootopia came out recently. So Shakira has the song Zoo. So, oh my goodness, it just is on constant, and it just makes us all hop up and dance. And so I got my youngest in my arms, my other 2 are just going crazy. And I think that we do have a zoo in our house. So it's a lot of fun.
It's on brand. So Zoo
Yes.
by Shakira is your happy song.
Yes.
Listen, Craig, we have really enjoyed talking to you. Let me recap your 5 songs. First, you had Take Me Home, Country Roads, followed by Waving the Flag. I can't wait to listen to that one because it's new, it's fresh, and I love the story behind that. Followed by Kill Them With Kindness, Rise Up, I'm Today, and then By Dirt is your last song. And your bonus song is Zoo by Shakira. Craig, thank you so much for living truly an unboxed life. Thank you for sharing the playlist and your journey. We're rooting for you. Listeners, go to Legacy Plus, figure out how you can actually get involved in some of these movements. And Craig, I can't wait. I'll have to have you back on the podcast. You're always doing something new. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for all you're doing. And thank you for what you're about to do. How about that?
Well, thank you. And it's so much fun to always spend time with you. So thank you for the honor and privilege to join you today.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to No Boxes, Just Verses. And if this episode moved y'all, please share it, rate us, follow the show on your favorite platform, and we can keep building our leadership playlists together. So you can find me, guys, on Instagram as Shannon Nash 1 and No Boxes Just Verses on Instagram. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Shannon Nash ESQ CPA. You can also find No Boxes Just Verses on LinkedIn. You can visit our website at noboxesjustverses.com. Finally, don't forget to check out the show notes. The show notes are super important because this is where the playlists will live. You will be able to get these playlists on Apple and Spotify. You'll also be able to follow up and see how to reach out to the guests, follow them and support them. Until next time, I need you to stay unboxed. You come for the stories, but you stay for the playlists. I'm Shannon Nash, and I'm out.
No boxes, just verses. Listen to the sound. No boxes, just verses. We not playing around. No boxes, just verses. Every voice reverse. No boxes, just verses. Unisex rehearse. No. This is Shannon Nash and I got cloud. This is Shannon Nash, the show's about. No boxes, just verses. The songs we used to play. No boxes, just verses. How we found our way. No boxes, just verses. Leading every day. No boxes, just verses. Let's all together say.